Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Dr. Leo is here from the Health and Wellness Spot. Now, this video is intended to actually help you understand the basics of these four processes: digestion, absorption, metabolism, and excretion. Once you understand these basics, you'll stop eating crappy foods. You'll also know how to actually maximize on even the slightest micronutrient in the food that you're actually consuming. Understand this, that under digestion we have two processes. One, we have the mechanical digestion, where you're breaking down food particles into smaller particles through chewing or through the peristaltic movement of the gut from the esophagus into the stomach and all through the gut. So that is for the digestion. For the absorption, again, two processes are involved here. One, for the fats and the water-soluble components. Understand that for you to absorb the water-soluble components into the system, and for you to actually bring something from the gut wall, gut lumen into the bloodstream, it must be soluble in water. That's why most of the things that are actually absorbed into the bloodstream are the carbohydrates and the proteins, because they are water soluble. The second process is the fat absorption. Now, fats are not soluble in blood, therefore they cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, the body understood that assignment. It brought you something called the lymphatic system, and through the luteal vessels, you get to absorb the fat plus the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and then goes into the lymphatic system and now into the system generally. So that is for the absorption. And again, for the absorption part, for example, for medications, all those drugs that are absorbed into the gut, actually basically everything that goes through the mouth has to go through the same process: the digestion, absorption, metabolism, and excretion. For drugs, here is where they dissolute, they release the active ingredient. They actually release the active ingredient from the tablet, because you see, for that tablet we have the ingredients and we have the active ingredient. Other ingredients are called the excipients. So in the gut you release the excipient, then you absorb the drug either in the stomach or in the small intestines. But understand that at the absorption level, the 80% of what we are taking through the mouth is going to be absorbed through the intestines, the small intestines to be specific. On the metabolism, the major organ that is actually involved in metabolic pathways or metabolism, which is also called biotransformation, is the second largest organ in the body, called the liver. And this organ has to be protected by all means, and you will understand why as I go through the process and as I'll be explaining this video. So here we have to be very cautious with the liver. Now we metabolize compounds, and metabolism is actually classified into two. We have catabolism. For those of you who understand Kiswahili, kata means cutting it down. So metabolism, the pathway that is called catabolism, means breaking down the larger molecules into smaller ones that can be utilized by the body. Okay, so kata, larger to smaller ones. Then there's another one that is called anabolism. You're building up larger molecules from smaller compounds. For example, when you break down amino acids, rather when you break down the larger proteins components like meat and all that, and then you release the amino acids for absorption, that is catabolism. But into the system, when you use these amino acids to bring them back and rebuild structural and muscle building proteins, that is now called anabolism. Okay, so when you break down carbohydrates to get glucose, that is catabolism. When you build back glucose molecules to form glycogen, that is what we call anabolism. Those two. Now, this process is very important because it can yield either water-soluble compounds or fat-soluble compounds. If they are water-soluble, they will be now excreted, ready for excretion through urine and through even sweat. But if you yield fat-soluble compounds, they will be retained into the bloodstream or into the system. So therefore, fat-soluble things take time to leave the system, because again, they are not soluble in water, and things that are supposed to be excreted are supposed to be water-soluble. For things like drugs, the liver metabolizes drugs into either active compounds or inactive compounds, water-soluble or water-insoluble compounds, so that it can actually ease on the burden of side effects. You excrete them if they are water-soluble through urine. Some are excreted through stool. That tells you that that organ is very important in terms of detoxification of drugs and also food compounds that you're actually consuming. On the excretion part, we have two major pathways. We have the stool, of course, the compounds that were not digested and they end up coming out through stool. And then the ones that were absorbed into the system and they went into the tissues to the cellular level, Metabolism happened there, energy harnessing happened there, nutrient absorption happened there, and then everywhere we have nutrients and we have energy machineries, there's release of waste products and carbon dioxide. So therefore the cells get to release carbon dioxide, which will leave the body through the lungs, and release waste products that will leave the body through urine. But the ones that were not absorbed will leave the body through the stool. Having understood those basics, let's jump into it. Now, when you see your plate, that plate that has colors, those colors end at this level. So your brown bread is going to end here. That brown color, it has no nutritional value. So the body does not understand colors when the food comes into the stomach. The body does not even understand that you ate fruits, that you ate brown chapati or white chapati. That ends with the eye. Now, when this comes into the mouth for mechanical digestion, sometimes chemical digestion through amylase, that is for the carbohydrates, you don't know gali anymore. You don't know chapati, you don't know rice, you don't know a fruit or whatever. What you know is the carbohydrate or the starch. It will be acted upon, and that is going downwards, is going for absorption and more further digestion for it to get into the system. As you eat your protein, it will be digested into the stomach. Now remember this, that this hydrochloric acid here is very important. We talked about iron absorption, and you saw that this one that actually liberates iron from that red meat and all that. But the most important part here is this hydrochloric acid is going to tear down or tear up the larger molecules or chunks of protein to release the smaller ones, at least the polypeptides, that will be easily acted upon when it gets into the small intestines by the enzymes that are coming from the pancreas into the duodenum. Okay, so this is very important. Also, there is a sphincter here. It's called the cardiac sphincter. Cardiac because it's near the heart, because we have a heart here. So this sphincter is closed when you have a concentrated stomach acid. So the more you eat the protein, the animal protein for that matter, the more you concentrate stomach acid, because the body understands you have to break it down through HCl. The more you close this sphincter, therefore nothing comes back to heart your esophagus, what you call the reflux disease or the heartburn. So most of you who are suffering from a heartburn are actually suffering from a weak stomach acid, and therefore this sphincter opens up and contents of the stomach come back to heart your esophagus. Guess what? You've been lied to about hyperacidity, so you'll end up taking an antacid, which will neutralize this stomach acid, causing an opening of this. So you'll get relief from symptoms for a short period of time, but afterwards, maybe 30 minutes later, it will get worse because this sphincter has opened up and all stomach contents are coming back to actually destroy you. So those antacids actually do a wrong thing here. Again, let's say you've eaten an egg, the protein, and as it comes into the stomach, you have to digest it. You have to tear it into smaller polypeptides. But the egg white, the white part of the egg, if you have an inflamed gut, for example, you're somebody who consumes a lot of medicines for pain, the diclofenac and the NSAIDs, the steroids. You're somebody who is constantly dehydrated for drinking water without adding a pinch of salt. You're somebody who is constantly avoiding salt because you've been told that salt will cause you more problems in terms of hypertension. So you're avoiding salt. And remember, this wall of the gut is actually made of mucus. That mucus, 95% of mucus is water. So therefore, if you're dehydrated, you're actually affecting this gut integrity, the gut wall integrity. If you're consuming inflammatory food, the seed oils, the wheat, the sugars, alcohol and all that, and drugs like aspirin, you're actually causing a problem to the gut wall. You're actually causing inflammation and perforation of this. We call that a leaky gut. So when you have this leaky gut, remember, there is an immune system that lines this gut wall all through. First is the blood vessels for absorption of the gut content into the portal system. But number two, we have the lining of the immune cells, the lymphatic system. So when you eat proteins, when you have this inflammation, parts of that, specifically the egg white, because most people complain about that, part of those particles will seep in through this perforation and they will encounter the immune system. Pardon me for using the word perforation, but of course you understand what I mean. So they will diffuse through and get to encounter the immune system. Now your immune system does not recognize gut content. So what it does is it reacts to them, and whatever you see on your skin or on your face in form of eruptions or those rashes after eating a protein diet is because you're actually messing up your gut wall integrity. It's not because you've eaten a protein. So those who complain about protein allergies, it's now time for you to understand that that protein allergy is a myth. You are just a wheat addict and a seed oil addict in denial. You are a sugar addict in denial. So you're actually messing up the integrity of the stomach wall and you end up suffering from that. So therefore, if you stop eating eggs so that you can actually heal from protein allergies, you're wasting time. you're actually losing out on nutrients that are supposed to help your body. But the ideal case is drop the inflammatory food so that your gut wall heals. Once the gut wall heals, you can now enjoy your protein without having to worry about allergies. But as you drop the eggs, you are taking a shortcut. You don't want to go the long way, because most of us just prefer eating the proteins and then going ahead and buying cetirizine or celestamine or an antihistamine to actually suppress the allergies. But the real case is you're suppressing the allergies instead of actually healing the gut wall. So if you drop eggs, have you actually healed the allergy? You have the answer. Now, when the food gets here, you digest it in the stomach, you release the polypeptides. Some of the carbohydrates that were digested in the mouth and were not completely digested, they will not be digested in the stomach. They'll head all the way to the small intestines for further digestion by the pancreatic enzymes. And now the fats are the only ones that will be digested only in the small intestines through the lipases that are coming also from the pancreas. That tells you that organ called the pancreas is another very important organ in terms of digestion and absorption of foods and food substances. So when you get here, absorption happens, 80% of absorption happens in this small intestine. And in this small intestine, what happens is further digestion and then absorption. But understand this, that there's an acid here, and some of the content that are coming into the small intestine have an acidic pH because they're just living in an acidic environment. We will address a point here. Those people who tell you to eat alkaline diets, if you eat anything alkaline, as it comes into this stomach, that will be neutralization. Therefore, as it's getting to be absorbed, you will not absorb alkaline diets anymore. You'll absorb something different. Now, contents that are coming into the small intestines are going to be acidic. So therefore, it's the role of the pancreas to bring in bicarbonates to neutralize the acid that is coming in with the contents of the food that are actually coming from the stomach. So that pancreas has to be protected by all means. So if you keep on eating frequently, what you're doing is you're constantly pumping the food that is highly acidic into the small intestines. You end up overworking the pancreas because it's now constantly producing bicarbonates and all that. And again, if you're constantly eating carbohydrates, you're actually again overworking the pancreas because you're forcing it to produce insulin every single time. Now you end up overworking it, and now diabetes is actually loading. So protect that pancreas by making sure you have at least 6 hours between meals, and also ensuring that you're fasting to actually concentrate the pancreatic juices and encourage the pancreatic action, so that the bicarbonates that will be produced here will actually help you neutralize this food that is coming here. Okay, and then reduce the frequency of eating, of course, so that you don't pump the acids into the small intestines all the time. I'm talking to people who have inflammatory bowel disease, the SIBO and all that, the conditions that involve this and the large intestines, basically the colitis. Okay, now understand we are bringing in compounds here, and then the pancreas is giving us pancreatic juices and enzymes. Those enzymes work optimally under alkaline pH. That tells you that food that is coming from here can actually alter the function of the pancreatic enzymes and juices. So the pancreas produces the bicarbonates intentionally to actually help you make an optimum environment for the function of these pancreatic enzymes. So they work very well under a basic pH, and that is the point here. Now, when you're bringing in this, you're going to digest protein, you're going to digest carbohydrates, and you're going to digest fat. That's why I told you the pancreas is the only organ that can actually carry out digestion single-handedly, because it has all the enzymes required for digestion of those three foods. Now, we want to absorb food from these small intestines, and in the small intestines we have things that look like the fingers. They are like finger-like projections called the villi or microvilli. They are this way because they now have to increase the surface area under which we absorb food contents into the bloodstream. Now, when you break down the protein, you will not absorb meat. So you will not absorb white meat or red meat. You will absorb amino acids. Amino acids are soluble in water, so they'll be absorbed direct into the bloodstream. Also, for the carbohydrate, as you eat ugali, you'll get glucose, or chapati or rice, that is glucose. For the fruits and honey, you'll get fructose. So nobody absorbs natural sugar. All of us absorb glucose, fructose, or galactose from the milk. So stop telling us that this is natural sugar and this is synthetic sugar. Your body does not understand that language. Your body knows glucose, fructose, or galactose depending on where it's coming from. And these are also water soluble, so they'll be absorbed direct into the portal system to be taken to the liver. But an interesting one is the fats. We break it down to glycerol and free fatty acids. We absorb the free fatty acids together with the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. So for you to absorb these vitamins, you must eat foods that are rich in fats, so that this dissolves in the fat and then they are emulsified by bile that is coming from the liver, so that you can actually absorb the fats plus the fat-soluble vitamins. This is one of the reasons why most of the population is actually deficient in these fat-soluble vitamins, because we don't eat the foods plus fats. We simply use the seed oils that are inflammatory. They'll mess up the gut. We can't absorb the fat-soluble vitamins. But understand this. For you to absorb the fats, you must have 3 organs that are very functional. Number 1 is the gut for absorption. Number 2 is the liver to give you bile to emulsify these fats so that you can actually easily absorb them with the fat-soluble vitamins. Number 3 is the pancreas, because it gives you the lipases that will help you digest the fat. So now you know. So these fats are absorbed differently. That's why I put them in red. And I will talk about these as I end the show, or as I end the teaching. So we've absorbed the carbohydrates in terms of glucose, galactose, and fructose, and the proteins in terms of amino acids. And they had, this is the gut wall, basically the enterocytes, the cells that line the gut wall. You absorb it, it goes into the portal vein system. Okay, this is a vein that actually carries all the gut contents into the liver for metabolism. Okay, so you absorb it and then you take it to the liver for metabolism. Now here, everything happens here. So we have metabolism, we also have storage here. Like for glucose, after metabolism into glycogen, you actually store it, or some of it is actually sent to get energy into the system. Fats are also sometimes stored here. For example, if you're bringing in fructose, the liver will metabolize fructose into triglycerides, which are just fats. So the more you eat those fruits, the fatter you become. Okay, now you understand. So when I tell you fruits are unhealthy to somebody who has metabolic conditions, they're arguing, oh, fruits are natural. I'm telling you now, you know, the active component of the fruit is fructose, and it will be converted to fats. And now you'll have a fatty liver. That is insulin resistance loading. So avoid those fruits, except avocados. So here we digest, we metabolize and we store. But I want you to see this. We have a heart. Because anyway, all these things will go into the heart. We have a heart. I'm not a good artist, but we can see that. In the heart here, we have 2 things. So we have the septum here. Then we have 2 things, of course. So this is the right auricle. This is the right ventricle. This is the left auricle. And then this, or atrium, and this is the left ventricle. This one has a thicker wall. Why? Because it has to pump blood all through the body. So it has this masculine wall called the left muscle, the left ventricular muscle. So it has to be thick. But there are 2 veins that bring blood into the heart. From above, so we are bringing into the right auricle. From above, we have the superior vena cava. And from below, we have the inferior vena cava. Now, components that are coming from the liver are going to come into the right auricle through the inferior vena cava. So we take it, metabolize it into the liver, we pump it into the inferior vena cava and into the right auricle, this one. Now, hold that thought, because I want you to see how fats are coming in handy. So let's go and check about the fats. In the same small intestines, we have those, the microvilli that we just mentioned. And beneath them, we have something that is called the little vessels. These are actually going to absorb the fat. So fat is not absorbed into the bloodstream. Fat is absorbed into the lymphatic system, to the little vessels, and now into the lymphatic vessels. These lymphatic vessels will carry all that fat plus its content of the lymph into the thoracic duct. And then from the thoracic duct, we'll take it into the left subclavian vein, So left subclavian vein. And then from here, we will carry it all the way to the superior vena cava, then into the right auricle. Understand, we have the right auricle here, then we have the right auricle here, or atrium. So whatever is coming from the liver is going to come in through the inferior vena cava, but whatever is coming in from the lymphatic system, including the fats, are going to come in through the superior vena cava, and all of them are deposited into the right part of the heart. Then they are pumped down into the right ventricle, and then of course out of the heart through the pulmonary artery into the lungs. So you take it to the lungs to get some oxygen, and then they are brought back to the heart. Now when they come back into the heart, they are coming back into the left auricle, and this is the pulmonary vein. Remember, pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood to the lungs to be oxidized, and then the oxygenated blood is coming in back to the heart through the pulmonary vein. Okay, and then when it comes into the left auricle or atrium, it is pumped into the left ventricle, and now the left ventricle pumps it out through into the system through the aorta. Now understand, we had this thick muscle here because we wanted this muscle to be able to pump blood all over the body. It's a very tedious process. So look at it this way. If it's pumping blood out through the aorta and then into the other arteries, venues, capillaries, and out into the system, imagine if your blood vessels are actually narrowing. So the diameter of blood vessels is actually narrowing. What will happen? Because this is what we call atherosclerosis, and we talked about that when we talked about sugar problems. So these are sugar problems. So if you're consuming sugars all the time and your HbA1c is going up, you are narrowing blood vessels. Now, this will exert a very serious strain to the left part of the heart, because now has to pump blood, struggle to pump blood through these narrowing blood vessels. And just the same way you go to the gym to lift for the biceps and they start to hypertrophy, this will happen the same to the heart. So the left side of the heart will start straining and the muscle will start growing bigger. We call that left ventricular hypertrophy. Hypertrophy means enlargement. Some of your parents have this condition and they are told they have an enlarged heart. Now, they become so scared because now they are thinking of the worst, surgery or death. Now, the problem is not the enlarged heart. No, the problem is the narrowing of the blood vessels that is exerting a lot of pressure to the heart. So if we give you a new heart, have we solved the problem in the blood vessels? The answer is no. So if we were wise and if medicine is actually dynamic, we would focus so much on making sure that whatever is causing the narrowing of blood vessels, which then causes a strain in the left side of the heart, is removed. So you remove this strain, you remove this narrowing, or you remove the sugar problem, basically atherosclerosis. You reverse that, your heart muscle starts to relax. But look at us taking shortcuts. We decide to give you drugs for the heart, we decide to give you drugs for hypertension to dilate blood vessels, constantly fixing the symptoms instead of focusing on what actually caused the narrowing of the blood vessels, hence causing an enlarged left side of the heart. If we focus here, we are actually treating the causes. We will know what brought that is sugar. A complication of diabetes is atherosclerosis, narrowing and thickening of blood vessels. But we don't want this, right? Because we want to maintain sugar, because sugar is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So we have to maintain us on eating sugar and then go ahead and do a surgery for the heart, give you a new heart. Yet the same heart will still undergo the same strain. So did we actually solve a problem here? Unless this is so complicated, that's the time we can actually think about changing everything here. But at this moment in time, anytime we insist about diets and healthy foods, we are insisting about fixing this inflammation and atherosclerosis so that we ease up on the tension that is actually happening in the left ventricle of the heart, causing you an enlarged heart. Pause that thought. So we've taken it to the heart, we've pumped it out into the cells. What is going to happen? All the nutrients are going to the tissues, to the cellular level. And now, oxygen which came from the lungs and the nutrients that came from the liver and also from the lymphatic system is coming into the cells for utilization. And as a cell utilizes this, of course, when you eat, you must poop or you must excrete something. So the cell excretes two things. One is the waste, and two is the carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is carried to the lungs for exhalation out. If this carbon dioxide starts to accumulate in the system, we end up forming something called the weak carbonic acid. Weak carbonic acid is basically water and CO2. Now this can take you into acidosis. This is the time where you start breathing shallowly and faster. Why? Because you want to excrete this acid faster from the system so that you stabilize the system and go back into normalcy, not acidosis. Also, the kidneys have a role here. They can actually excrete more of the hydrogen ions to take you back into normalcy. So if you have a functional kidney and functional lungs, you'll never have to worry about acidosis, because one of their roles is to actually control that acidosis and alkalosis. Okay? The waste, if your kidneys are dysfunctional, you start building up the wastes and you start having problems. That's why you should protect your kidneys. Some of these wastes, like ammonia, they can build up in the system and start causing you psychosis. Okay? And therefore, you must protect your kidneys so that they can actually remove this waste through urine. But remember, kidney problems are sugar problems. So therefore, diabetic nephropathy, people who have high blood sugars all the time, people who consume too much carbohydrates, you're actually causing the problem of insulin resistance. That is going to cause a kidney problem, and therefore you'll be unable to excrete excess waste. You end up in problems. Now you have to do a dialysis to wash out this waste from the system. So protect that kidney. Okay, that is one. Number two, let's say you've consumed food that was not absorbed. All the content that were not absorbed will leave the system through the large intestine and out through stool. But understand this, that in the large intestine, most of us are unable to digest fat. Actually, human beings do not have enzymes that can help them digest fat or fiber. So the fiber that is coming in with vegetables, with the sweet potatoes and the complex carbohydrates, we are unable to digest it. So what happens is the gut microorganisms that live in the large intestines are the ones that actually help us to break down this fiber, and in return they give us the B vitamin. So it's like a symbiotic relationship. They feed on fiber and they end up giving you the B vitamins, or they aid in actually making the stool bulk so that you can actually have a flow in the bowel. But remember this, a destabilization in those gut microorganisms, you'll end up getting constipation. Also, overfeeding these gut microorganisms by consuming too much fiber. For example, those people who want to lose weight and they consume a whole bowl of vegetables every single day. You are giving yourself a lot of fiber and you're overfeeding these gut microorganisms. They'll end up being redundant and very reluctant. Therefore, they'll not help you digest more of the fiber. You will end up having a very, very bulky stool, and that is constipation. So therefore, as you eat those vegetables, make sure you don't overfeed the gut microorganisms so that we don't end up suffering from constipation and indigestion. I hope you've understood that. So everything goes down to that. By the time you're getting to excretion level, you've done all these things. But I want you to see this. When the doctor says that fats will clog your arteries and cause you atherosclerosis, please remind him that atherosclerosis is actually a sugar problem, not a fat problem. Fats come in, the cholesterol actually comes in to actually coat what sugar started. So it's actually blamed for what sugar caused. Number two, fats are not absorbed into the bloodstream. They're absorbed into the lymphatic system and then goes all the way to the heart to be sent into the cells for either storage or utilization. But lining of the blood vessels that carry fat, the veins and also the arteries that actually carry the fat, we have cells here that are called the endothelial cells. These cells line this blood vessel, and their role is to ensure that blood flows into this blood vessel smoothly and keenly. So blood flows through these blood vessels very smoothly, courtesy of these endothelial cells. But understand this, these endothelial cells have another function. And one of their functions is to produce something that is called lipoprotein lipase. Lipase means an enzyme that breaks down fats. So as the fat is actually going through this, because it's actually coated with the HDL, so that it can actually be transported to the cells. So as the fat is going through this blood vessel, these cells are producing something called lipoprotein lipase. This enzyme makes sure that it actually breaks down these larger molecules of fat, liberates them from the carrier, the LDL, sorry, this is not HDL, this is LDL. So liberates it from the carrier and then makes them diffuse through the blood vessel wall into the cells, either the fat cells for utilization or for storage there. So when you destroy this integrity of this endothelial lining, and what destroys that is actually sugar, seed oils, drugs, tobacco smoking, alcohol, and wheat products. They come and cause inflammation and they destroy this integrity of these endothelial cells. Therefore, the amounts or the levels of lipoprotein lipase that is supposed to help you remove the fats from the system is actually now going down. Therefore, you cannot be able to pump these fats into the fat cells for storage. Now, that tells you this, that fats are not the ones that are responsible for clogging your arteries. It's actually the foods that cause inflammation, which reduces the amount of the lipoprotein lipase that is supposed to help you remove the fat from the system. So then here is another scenario where we keep on blaming the cholesterol or the fats for what sugar, seed oils, smoking cigarettes, alcohol, and all those inflammatory foods have caused us. I hope you've understood this. Once you understand this, there's nothing that will actually beat you up. You will understand that fats have their way of absorption. You will understand that proteins and carbohydrates have their own way of absorption. And you will see how they end up getting to the cellular level. And at this level, you will know even how they are excreted from the system. Protein getting out as ammonia or urea and stuff. And carbohydrates basically being broken down to CO2 and water and leaving the system through urine or through the lungs. This is an entire system of digestion, absorption, metabolism, and excretion. Once you understand this shall form a basis for you understanding more, because I'll talk about fat metabolism. I'll talk about the intercellular digestion, which you call the intradigestion. This is basically the external digestion. We have the internal digestion that happens in the cells. So once I mention that, you'll be able to understand, because you already have the basics here.